Hey Absol-lites, Pokemon Fire Red with only Krabby and no HM slaves was a pain. So I'm gonna do a run that will hopefully be a bit easier. Today we figure out, can I beat Pokemon Emerald with a team of only one Machop? Stats-wise, Machop is nothing special, having roughly the stats of a first form starter. Then we look at the moves, and while coverage is a steaming pile of garbage, it gets a ton of fairly strong moves that use its good physical attack. By TM it gets better moves, but still not great. Like always, I'm writing the script as I go, so this part is actually written before I start. Write a comment saying if you think I can win or not. I'm confident that I can win, but Tate and Liza are probably going to be a pain. Okay, so the rules for this challenge are pretty simple. I can only use Machop in battle, but I will need other Pokemon for HMs. No glitches or exploits, and no items in battle. Before we get started, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to join the Absol-lites, and let's get started! Right off the bat, I used the Universal Pokemon Randomizer to replace Trico with Machop. I picked to replace Trico so that my rival will have Torchic, the hardest for us to fight. I name it Twitch, after a very good live streaming service you should all follow me on. At level 14, I tried the fight with Roxanne. I easily swept her entire team with Low Kick and Karate Chop. It took a while, but I was never in serious danger. Brawly, however, was a bit scary, but really not that huge a threat. I decided to start with Focus Energy to buff my crit chance, and then I OHKO'd Machop with Karate Chop. For Meditate, I set up one Leer and considered doing more, but opted to instead just start attacking. This ended up being the right call, because he went for Focus Punch, a move that can be terrifying, but has -6 priority, and fails if the user is hit before it can work. He spammed that until I took down Meditate. Last is Makahita. I used Karate Chop, he used Bulk Up, he healed with a Berry, I used another Karate Chop, he used Vital Throw, I took him down with a crit Karate Chop. Next up is the only May fight that I ever talk about, because the others are really easy, and it was actually surprisingly hard. So hard, in fact, that I'm going to do for this fight what I do for pretty much every hard fight, just show every attempt, sped up in editing, until I win. In total, it only took about 3 minutes of IRL time, but it was annoying, and I was speeding up the game, so in-game it probably would have taken longer if I wasn't. I pretty much just fought her until the odds lined up right and I won, nothing much to say. Watson, on the other hand, was kinda annoying. His Voltorb used Self-Destruct, doing big damage and ending the turn before I got the chance to do any setup. On Electrike, he just used Howl, so I could set up one Bulk Up, allowing me to OHKO. I got a crit, but I didn't matter. Magneton was also an OHKO with Karate Chop. Last is Manectric, and he used Thunder Wave. I used Karate Chop, leaving him on barely any HP, then he just used Howl, letting me come in and finish him off. Maxi time. I used 2 Bulk Ups to boost my defense 2 stages and counter the Intimidate, then I took him down with 1 Karate Chop. Took out Zubat with 1 crit Rock Tomb. Last is Camerupt, and I took him out in 2 Rock Tombs. Flannery ended up taking more tries than I'd like to admit, honestly. I started by setting up 5 Bulk Ups, and then I swept her whole team with either Brick Break or Rock Tomb. This took a lot of attempts solely because I was convinced for a while that Brick Break would do more than Rock Tomb. I don't remember why, and I'm writing this right after doing the fight. Norman was actually harder than he probably should have been. I started by setting up 1 Bulk Up, then he used Teeter Dance, confusing me. I hit myself twice, got to set up a 2nd Bulk Up, snapped out of confusion, and swept the entire remainder of his team with Karate Chop. Winona actually ended up being surprisingly easy, all things considered. I started by setting up 3 Bulk Ups on Swablu, knowing from previous attempts that I need to be able to OHKO Skarmory before it ruined my accuracy. Once I was done setting up, I OHKO'd with Rock Tomb. Next is Skarmory, and I went for Karate Chop, she went for Aerial Ace, she healed, and I finished her off with a couple Karate Chops. Tropius I just OHKO'd with Rock Tomb. Pelipper used some really annoying Confusion and Protect strats, but thankfully I got lucky with Protect failing and me not hitting myself, and when I finally got in a hit, I OHKO'd. Last is Altaria. She used Dragon Dance, I missed Rock Tomb, she used Dragon Breath, and I OHKO'd with Rock Tomb. Time for the Magma Hideout Maxi fight. I used Karate Chop, bringing him to yellow, then he healed. I used another Karate Chop, bringing him to yellow, and then on the turn I set up Bulk Up, he switched to Crobat. Crobat used Confuse Ray, which I healed with a Person Berry I was holding, then I used Rock Tomb. I went for Karate Chop thinking, oh, I'm overleveled, it should easily KO from here. Yeah, it wasn't. Karate Chop barely did anything, and then he used Air Cutter, doing more than I was comfortable with. Another Rock Tomb though, and he was down. For Camerupt, I was never really in danger, and various uses of Rock Tomb, Bulk Up, and Karate Chop took him down. So I was at 14 health when I did. Last is his very damaged Mightyena, and I easily finished him with Karate Chop. Time for the Psychic Leaders Tate and Liza. For the record, since they used double battles, I taught Protect to my fly using Wingull, and had it spam that until they took it down. I set up 2 Bulk Ups while they targeted Wingull, and then I used Return to Oko Zatu on the turn Protect failed. Claydol used Ancient Power, but it barely did anything, as they brought out Lunatone. I used Karate Chop on said Lunatone to Oko it, and Claydol just used Earthquake, hardly doing anything to me. I Oko'd with Return, and now it's just Solrock versus me. They used Sunny Day, I used Karate Chop, they used Solar Beam, they healed with a berry, and I took them down the next turn. I cannot tell you how good it felt to beat them after Helix knows how many attempts. We're now at strangely the only Archie fight in the game, and I was a bit worried because of confusion hacks, but he's just maxi with a water type, so I was never really in much danger after that ridiculous Tate and Liza battle. Juan was really easy. I started by setting up 2 Bulk Ups on Love Disc, but he attracted and confused me, so before doing any more setup, I took him out. I then set up 1 more Bulk Up on Whiscash, and swept his whole team with either Return or Karate Chop. After the fight, I headed up to a house in the northwest so I could finally get rid of Karate Chop in exchange for the TM for Brick Break. Now, we are finally at the Elite Four, starting with Dark Trainer Sydney. Haven't said that in a while. He was pretty easy. Some double team hacks from Shiftry were annoying, but for the most part, I just swept his team with Brick Break, despite my attack being down from Intimidate the whole time. Next up is Ghost Trainer Phoebe. Considering only one of my moves can hit her Pokemon, I decided it best to use the Earthquake TM I picked up a while ago to teach it instead of Rock Tomb, since Rock Tomb's inaccurate and I doubt I'll need it. After doing so, I set up 2 Bulk Ups and swept her team with Earthquake. I was a bit worried about PP thanks to a few of her Pokemon having pressure, but I wasn't really in danger. Moving on to Ice Trainer Glacia. I swept most of her team with Brick Break. The only Pokemon that it didn't Oko was Walrein, landing it in red, but she had a berry causing her not to heal, so I took her down. Last before the champion is Dragon Trainer Drake. I set up 3 Bulk Ups on Shelgon, then I used Return to Oko. For Altaria, I knew he always starts with at least 1 Dragon Dance, so I took the opportunity to set up another Bulk Up, and then I Oko'd with Return. Next is Kingdra, and I Oko'd with Brick Break, but not before he got in 1 Surf, bringing me to only 66 health. For Flygon, I Oko'd with Return, but not before he got me down to only 12 HP. Last is Salamence, and before I did anything, he outsped and took me down with 1 Flamethrower. When you account for the fact that this was like my 20th attempt at least, I think I need to grind a bit. I came back at level 76. I started with 1 Bulk Up, knowing that Shelgon would use Protect, and then I used Return, just barely not KOing. So while he healed, I set up another Bulk Up, letting me KO the next turn. Out now is Altaria, and I used another Bulk Up, knowing he'd start with Dragon Dance. The next turn, he used another Dragon Dance, but I used Return, Okoing. For Kingdra, I used Return, he used Dragon Dance, letting me easily take the KO. Next up to bat is Flygon, and he used Dragon Breath, paralyzing me. I used another Bulk Up knowing that I'd probably need to for Salamence, and then was fully paralyzed for a turn, before shooting back and Okoing with Return. Last is his pseudo-legendary Salamence. He used Dragon Claw, bringing me to only 6 health, but then I fired back with Return, blasting through Paralysis, and one-shot him. Last is Wallace, the Pokemon champion. I set up one bulk up while he set up Rain, then I got him really low with Brick Break, so I used another bulk up, expecting him to heal. He did so, and then I OHKO'd with Return. Whiscash, I got really low with Brick Break, but I did not quite KO, so I used bulk up, predicting a heal. However, this time, he didn't heal, instead going for a Hyper Beam and doing the least amount of damage I have ever seen that move do. I used another bulk up, knowing he'd need to recharge, and then I used Return to finish him off. Next is Tentacruel, and I was a bit worried about it because of previous attempts, but thankfully it went for Hydro Pump and missed, so I could OHKO with Return. Ludicolo, I also OHKO'd with Return. Water Onix is out now, and I OHKO'd with Return. Last is Milotic, and I got one-shot with Surf. Okay, I think I need to grind. I came back at level 78 holding a Quick Claw. Not a huge jump, I know, but I EV trained fully and completely in speed to make sure I could outspeed Milotic. Like always, I started by setting up Bulk Up, then I used Return, getting him into full restore range, so I used another Bulk Up on the turn he healed. Because of that, my attack was high enough that I could beat him. Whiscash was an easy OHKO with Brick Break. Tentacruel was an easy OHKO with Return. Ludicolo was an OHKO with Brick Break. Water Onix I did about 3/4 to, and then he used Dragon Dance, letting him outspeed and get in a Hyper Beam, which despite my several defense buffs, still did quite a lot. Last is Milotic. I got it down to barely any health, he used Surf getting me down to barely any health, and then he healed with Citrus Berry. I expected that because of that he wouldn't heal, so rather than setting up, I used another Brick Break. At this point, it became a battle of attrition. I didn't know how many healing items he had, so I couldn't set up and risk him attacking rather than healing, so I just kept on attacking, knowing he couldn't heal forever. When he eventually got through his full restores, I finally took him out after eons of trying. So, that's that. I won. I beat Pokemon Emerald with a team of only a single level 79 Machop. So we're done now, right? Of course not. There's still a post-game fight with Steven Stone. Skarmory missed a Toxic and set up Spikes on the first 2 turns while I set up Bulk Up. After that, I used Brick Break, getting him to a bit above half, and then he used Aerial Ace, getting me down to about 1/4. He missed another Toxic, I used another Brick Break, and I knew he'd heal, so I used another Bulk Up. Another Brick Break got him to a bit below half, but then he finally hit Toxic. One Brick Break finished him. Last is Armaldo, and I OHKO'd with Brick Break. Next he, surprisingly, brought out his pseudo-legendary Metagross, who took me down in one Meteor Mash. Wow, I think I need to grind a bit. To grind, I just battled the Elite Four over and over again for XP, and at a certain point, decided that I'm only going to do this for one grinding session, up to level 86, and if I can't win from there, I just won't win. At level 86, I still can't get past Skarmory without getting insanely lucky and Toxic missing a whole bunch. Okay, I'm done. Good night to you all. Man, this run was odd. It was easier than the Krabby run or the Butterfree and Beedrill one, but it was still pretty hard. I really thought I'd be able to beat Steven without doing a ton of grinding. I know I can probably win if I come up with some crazy, get burnt on purpose to take advantage of Guts strategy, but I really don't feel like doing so. I think the next run I'll do, probably in 2 weeks, will most likely be Pokemon Emerald with only Team Magma/Aqua Pokemon, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, subscribe, ring the bell to join the Absol-lites, all that jazz, and peace out!